Cash and Vern woke up to the sound of a klaxon blaring across the fractured lunar colony of Selenia. It was like being serenaded by a particularly angry cat with a megaphone. He rubbed his eyes and cursed the day he decided that a career in terraforming was a good idea. "Welcome to the moon," he muttered, swinging his legs out of bed. "Where water's a fantasy and oxygen's a suggestion." The comm on his wrist buzzed. Adira Niven's voice, as smooth and sarcastic as ever, crackled through. "Morning, Chief. Hope you've had your coffee because the terraformers just threw another tantrum." Cashin rolled his eyes. Of course they did. What is it this time? A power surge? Another alien rat chewing through cables? Try a total systems failure again, Adira replied. Probably the one thing that could make this hellhole more interesting. Cashin sighed and dragged on his jumpsuit, the fabric sticking to his skin with the delightful enthusiasm of a second skin he didn't ask for. He headed towards the control room, trying to ignore the fact that the air tasted like disappointment and recycled farts. Adira was already there, her expression as unimpressed as ever. She leaned against a console, her dark eyes scrutinizing the mess of data like a cat watching a very confused mouse. "Any bright ideas, or should we just start praying to the vacuum? Prayer won't help," Cashin replied, flipping switches with the enthusiasm of someone trying to defuse a bomb with tweezers. "But maybe kicking it will." He slammed a fist against the console. Surprisingly, a few lights flickered back to life. "There, see. Advanced lunar engineering at its finest," Adira smirked, a small victory in a sea of impending doom. "And they said violence never solves anything. We should tell the alien delegation about this great human custom," Cashin suggested with a wry grin. "Maybe they'd appreciate the cultural exchange." "Oh, they're here already, by the way," Adira added, her voice dripping with mock enthusiasm. Ambassador Zarla and her entourage of bug-eyed tourists. Perfect timing, Cashin muttered, rubbing his temples. Nothing like a little interspecies embarrassment to start the day. As if on cue, the doors slid open with a whoosh that was probably supposed to sound futuristic, but instead resembled a distant fart. Ambassador Zarla entered, her elongated form gliding across the room with an air of superiority that only someone with multiple eyes and antennae could pull off. "Greetings, Chief Terraformer Vern," Zarla intoned, her voice a discordant melody of clicks and whistles. "We are honored to witness your process." Cashin forced a smile, the kind that felt like it had been stapled to his face. "Welcome, Ambassador. As you can see, our process is currently experiencing a slight hiccup." "Hiccup," Zarla repeated, her antennae twitching. "Does this term refer to a minor malfunction or a catastrophic failure in human terms?" "A bit of both," Adira answered, her tone dry enough to rival the lunar surface. "We like to keep things exciting." Zarla regarded her with a mixture of curiosity and what might have been disbelief. "Your customs continue to fascinate us." Cashin exchanged a glance with Adira, both of them suppressing laughter. "Well, Ambassador, if you're here for the full human experience, you're in luck. You're about to see us work miracles with duct tape and desperation." The ambassador's entourage, a collection of suitably alien beings, watched the interaction with something that might have been amusement or horror. It was hard to tell with so many eyes and no discernible mouths. "So, what's the plan?" Adira asked, leaning closer to Cashin. "Other than hoping the aliens find our incompetence charming," Cashin pondered for a moment, his mind racing through options like a rat in a maze with no exit. "We could try rerouting power from the auxiliary generators. Maybe get some systems online and hope for a miracle." "Hope and miracles, two things we left behind on Earth," Adira quipped. "But hey, we've got duct tape," Cashin chuckled, a grim sound that echoed in the sterile room. "Let's get to it then. Maybe we can convince the universe we're not entirely doomed." They set to work, the room filled with the hum of machinery and the occasional curse as Cashin and Adira wrestled with uncooperative circuits. Zarla and her entourage watched, fascinated by humanity's unique approach to problem solving, which seemed to involve equal parts ingenuity and luck. "You know," Adira said as she adjusted a circuit board, "there's something almost poetic about this whole mess." "In what universe?" Cashin asked, a wire sparking in his hand. "The one where humans are stubborn enough to survive against all odds. Even if it means making fools of ourselves in front of aliens." Cashin snorted, shaking his head. "I'd drink to that if we had anything worth drinking." As the minutes ticked by, something resembling progress emerged from the chaos. Lights flickered on across the control panels, systems whirring back to a semblance of life. The terraformers were breathing again, albeit with a wheeze that didn't instill much confidence. "There," Cashin declared, brushing his hands off as if he just vanquished a particularly annoying insect. "Crisis averted, for now." The ambassador's antennae twitched in what might have been a nod of approval. "Impressive work, Chief Vern. Your resilience is noteworthy. Resilience or stupidity, take your pick," Adira muttered under her breath. Cashin smiled, a genuine one this time. "Thank you, Ambassador. We aim to please. Or at the very least survive." Zarla considered him for a moment, her alien features inscrutable. "We will continue to observe your process. It is, after all, a unique insight into human perseverance." As the alien delegation departed, leaving Cashin and Adira alone in the aftermath of chaos, Cashin couldn't help but chuckle. "Well, that was fun." Adira rolled her eyes. "You have a strange definition of fun." "It's the only kind I've got," Cashin replied, surveying the control room with a mix of pride and resignation. "Let's hope the next surprise is a bit more pleasant," Adira said, though the skepticism in her voice suggested she wasn't holding her breath. Cashin nodded, feeling the weight of the lunar dust and responsibility settle on his shoulders once more. "Yeah, here's hoping." And with that, they returned to the endless task of keeping Selenia's fragile ecosystem from imploding, knowing full well that more challenges awaited just beyond the horizon, or perhaps the next malfunctioning circuit. Regardless, they faced it all with a grim determination and the knowledge that, if nothing else, they'd at least have a good story to laugh about later, assuming they survived long enough to tell it. Cashin Vern was beginning to feel like a character in a cosmic sitcom, with each episode more absurd than the last. He stood at the colony's edge, staring out into the vast expanse of nothingness that was the lunar surface, the sort of view that made a person reflect on their life choices. Water was still a fantasy, oxygen still a suggestion, and the terraformers were about as reliable as a politician's promise during election season. Beside him, Adira Niven crossed her arms, her demeanor as unflappable as ever. "So what's the plan, Chief? Besides not dying in the next Ior?" He scratched his head, already regretting waking up that morning. "Well, the terraformers are back online, but they are more temperamental than a moody teenager. We need to stabilize the atmosphere before we all suffocate or the aliens decide we're better off as a failed experiment. Nothing like a little existential crisis to kickstart the day," Adira quipped, her eyes scanning the lunar horizon. "And speaking of crises, did you see Zarla's reaction to the memorial service invite?" Cashin chuckled, a dark sound that matched the mood perfectly. "Yeah, like watching a cat trying to understand the concept of a bath. I'm pretty sure she thinks we're planning some kind of ritual sacrifice. Can't blame her. Our customs are an acquired taste. The memorial service for fallen terraformers was as inevitable as the next system failure. It was a chance to remember the poor souls who'd been turned into space debris or human popsicles, thanks to the endless hazards of lunar colonization. It was tradition, and like all great traditions, nobody really questioned if it was a good idea. The service was held in the colony's cramped rec room, which smelled faintly of burnt coffee and despair. Cashin eyed the assembled crowd, composed of the usual suspects, a mix of exhausted humans and Ambassador Zarla's entourage, their antennae twitching in what could only be described as alien confusion. "Here we go," Adira whispered as she took her place beside Cashin. "Let's see how the aliens handle a bit of human morbidity." The ceremony began with a somber tribute to the departed, a slideshow of grainy images flickering across a makeshift screen. The pictures were accompanied by a recording of classical Earth music, an odd choice considering the circumstances. But then again, who was Cashin to question the colonists' taste? Zarla's expression was a picture of polite bewilderment as the slideshow transitioned to the traditional reading of names, each punctuated by a bell. The sound echoed through the room, loud enough to make even the most hardened colonist flinch. Cashin couldn't help but notice how the aliens seemed to recoil with each chime, like they were being subjected to some kind of auditory torture. On behalf of the colony, we honor those who have given their lives to ensure our survival, the officiant declared with the solemnity of a funeral director who'd seen one too many dead bodies. May they find peace among the stars. Cashin suppressed a snort. Peace among the stars. More like dust in the vacuum. But hey, everyone needed a little optimism in their life. Next came the moment everyone dreaded, the personal tributes. Colonists shuffled awkwardly to the front, sharing stories about the deceased that range from heartwarming to hilariously inappropriate. One woman fondly recounted how her late husband had a knack for repairing the oxygen filters with nothing but a screwdriver and a string of particularly inventive obscenities. "Ah, the memories we cherish," Adira whispered to Cashin, her voice barely audible over the murmur of the crowd. "Bet the aliens are loving this." Cashin glanced at Zarla, who was trying valiantly to maintain an expression of diplomatic neutrality. It was like watching a child attempt to eat broccoli without gagging. "They're probably reconsidering their decision to visit us. Wouldn't be the first time someone regretted meeting humans," Adira replied, her lips twitching into a wry smile. As the ceremony drew to a close, Cashin found himself reflecting on the current state of affairs, or lack thereof. The terraformers were a ticking time bomb, and the precarious balance of life on Selenia hung by a thread. But for now they had survived another day, and sometimes that was enough. "Well, that was enlightening," Adira commented as the crowd began to disperse, the air filled with the low hum of post-service chatter. "Think Zarla learned anything valuable?" "Probably that humans are a little too comfortable with death," Cashin replied, watching as the ambassador and her entourage made their way towards them. "And that we make terrible vacation partners." Zarla approached with the cautious curiosity of someone who'd just witnessed a particularly bizarre nature documentary. "Chief Terraformer Vern, Engineer Niven," she began, her voice a harmonious blend of clicks and whistles that still sounded vaguely condescending. "Your commemorative rituals are intriguing." Adira raised an eyebrow. "Intriguing. That's one way to put it. We celebrate life by acknowledging its end," Cashin explained, trying not to laugh at the absurdity of having to justify human customs to a race that probably thought wearing pants was a sign of barbarism. "It's a reminder that we're all just one malfunction away from becoming space dust." Zarla tilted her head, considering this. "Fascinating. Your species possesses a remarkable capacity for resilience, even in the face of mortality." "Or stupidity," Adira muttered, once again under her breath. Cashin shot her a sidelong glance, the hint of a smile tugging at his lips. "Call it what you will, Ambassador. We like to think of it as perseverance." The alien delegation departed, their antennae swaying with each step, leaving Cashin and Adira to once again face the daunting task ahead. "So, what now?" Adira asked, already heading for the exit. "Back to saving the colony from itself." Cashin nodded, the weight of responsibility feeling like a particularly unwelcome hangover. "Yeah. We've got a lot of work to do and not much time to do it." "Wouldn't have it any other way," Adira replied, her sarcasm holding a hint of genuine camaraderie. Despite the bleakness of their situation, there was something reassuring about the predictability of it all. Problems arose, they solved them, or at least tried to, and life went on, however precariously. They returned to the control room, where the air was still thick with the scent of electronics and tension. Cashin took a deep breath, the recycled air filling his lungs with all the enthusiasm of a deflated balloon. "All right, let's see if we can keep this rock habitable for another day." Adira rolled up her sleeves, her eyes gleaming with a mix of determination and mischief. "Think the terraformers are feeling cooperative?" Cashin shrugged, flipping a switch with the nonchalance of a man who'd accepted his fate. "Only one way to find out." They set to work, a familiar dance of wires and circuits, their movements synchronized by necessity and a shared desire to avoid becoming the next names on the colony's memorial list. The terraformers, predictably, resisted their efforts with the tenacity of a mule refusing to budge. "Stubborn bastards," Cashin muttered, glaring at the flickering control panel. "Must be where they get their charm," Adira replied, her fingers deftly navigating the tangled mess of cables. Hours passed, the monotonous hum of the machinery punctuated by the occasional curse or exasperated sigh. It was grueling work, the kind that left a person questioning their life decisions and considering a career change, perhaps as a hermit on a deserted asteroid. Finally, a semblance of progress emerged. The terraformers hummed back to life, their systems flickering into stability with all the enthusiasm of a drunk uncle performing a lullaby. "Looks like we've done it," Cashin declared, brushing his hands together as if he'd just pulled off a magic trick. Adira leaned back, surveying the room with a mixture of satisfaction and exhaustion. "Well, it's not dead, so that's something." "Another crisis averted," Cashin added, though he knew better than to tempt fate with such declarations. "Until the next one," Adira said, standing and stretching her arms above her head. "Think Zarla will put in a good word for us with her superiors," Cashin laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Only if they are looking for a prime example of human improvisation, or desperation. Maybe both." As they left the control room, a comforting silence settled over them. Outside, the lunar landscape stretched endlessly, a reminder of their isolation and vulnerability. Yet in that solitude there was also a sense of freedom, the freedom to forge their own path however uncertain. "Think we'll ever get the hang of this?" Adira asked, her voice softened by the quiet. Cashin shrugged, the weight of responsibility an old, familiar companion. "Who knows, but we'll keep trying." They walked on, two figures against the vastness of space, their footsteps echoing in the stillness. Despite the odds, they'd survived another day, and for now, that was enough. As long as there was breath in their lungs, they'd keep fighting, keep laughing in the face of adversity, and keep proving that humans were a stubborn, irreverent bunch. And maybe, just maybe, that was their greatest strength. Cashin stared at the readout on the flickering control panel with a kind of resigned horror that one might reserve for discovering a rodent in the pantry, or perhaps a corpse. The terraformers had outdone themselves this time, the little bastards. The systems were lighting up like a fireworks display, each error message a colorful reminder of his impending doom. "Looks like the terraformers have decided to go on strike," he said, rubbing his temple in an attempt to stave off the headache threatening to burst forth. Adira, her eyes never leaving the tangle of cables she was wrestling with, snorted. Who knew inanimate objects could be such prima donnas? "Hell, they're almost human," Cashin replied. "All we need now is for them to demand paid leave and a pension plan." Adira shot him a sidelong glance, her lips quirking upwards. "We're on the moon, Cashin. No one's getting a pension here." Cashin chuckled darkly, half listening to the whir and clank of machinery that seemed intent on ascending to new levels of malfunction. "Yeah, well, maybe we'll get lucky and they'll just explode instead." "Optimism," Adira said, mimicking the tone of a public service announcement, "not just a delusion but a lifestyle choice." Cashin leaned back against the console, folding his arms. "All right, humor me. What's plan B?" Plan B," Adira mused, feigning deep thought. "Usually involves copious amounts of swearing and a good old-fashioned manual override." "Perfect," Cashin said. "But I do have a slightly more experimental idea." Adira stopped, her hands pausing mid-tangle. "Experimental. I love it when you talk dangerous. Repurposing lunar materials, Cashin continued, ignoring her jab, might give us the wiggle room we need to stabilize the terraformers, at least for now. Go on, Adira prompted, her curiosity piqued. Cashin scratched his chin. I'm thinking we could gather some of the regolith, moon dust, you mean? Adira interjected. Right, moon dust. We could use it to replace the depleted silicates in the terraformers. Might just buy us enough time to fix the other glitches. Adira considered this, her fingers resuming their work. Well, it's either that or we start praying. I was hoping to avoid divine intervention, Cashin said dryly. You know how unreliable that is, especially when you haven't called in a while, Adira added with a smirk. So, moon dust it is. But you do realize this means trudging out onto the lunar surface, right? Cashin sighed, the weight of that particular task sitting on him like an elephant. Can't be worse than a stroll through the colony rec room. True, Adira agreed. That place is a death trap of bad interior design and stale coffee. With a shared nod, they activated their suits and prepared to brave the barren nothingness outside. Cashin checked his comm, ensuring the oxygen levels were acceptable, at least by lunar standards, which was akin to saying that a leaky canoe was seaworthy. You're sure this is going to work? Adira asked, her voice crackling through the comms. No, Cashin replied, but if we're lucky, we'll only make things worse. They stepped out onto the lunar surface, the vast expanse of gray stretching before them like a miser's dreamscape. The emptiness was almost comforting, Cashin thought, if you were the kind of person who enjoyed being alone with your thoughts. Not that he had many positive ones at the moment. Remind me again why we took this job. Adira's voice came through the helmet's speakers, tinged with exaggerated regret. Beats me, Cashin said. But I'm guessing it had something to do with our mutual love of isolation and the thrill of possibly dying in space. Ah, the romantic notion of martyrdom, Adira quipped. How could I have forgotten? They trudged onward, collecting samples of regolith and stuffing them into containers with the enthusiasm of children cleaning their rooms. Cashin glanced up at the earth hanging in the sky, a distant blue marble that seemed to mock their efforts with its serene beauty. Looks peaceful up there, he said, trying to ignore the sweat trickling down his back despite the chill. Yeah, well, looks can be deceiving, Adira replied. Remember the time you thought that mushroom stew was a good idea? That was a culinary adventure, Cashin protested. Besides, the hallucinations were quite the experience. Back in the colony, the task of explaining human spirituality to Zarla proved to be a more challenging endeavor than Cashin had anticipated. He left Adira to manage that particular diplomatic mission, knowing that she had a knack for turning confusion into somewhat less confusion. So humans believe in life after death? Zarla asked, the alien's eyes reflecting the dim light with an unsettling intensity. Well, some do, Adira replied, trying to sound reassuring. It's more about hope, really. The idea that there's something beyond this life. Zarla's antennae twitched thoughtfully. And this is why you celebrate death, celebrate. Adira glanced at Cashin, who was busily pretending to be engrossed in his work. Not exactly. We acknowledge it, sure. It's more about remembering those who've passed, by freezing their remains into popsicles. Zarla's confusion bordered on amusement. It's symbolic, Adira explained, a hint of exasperation creeping into her voice. Shows preservation. Ah, Zarla nodded, as if this explained everything. A fascinating ritual. Cashin couldn't help but grin at the exchange, his cynicism tempered somewhat by Adira's valiant, if misguided, attempt to bridge the cultural gap. Humans are resourceful, Zarla continued, addressing Cashin directly. Your methods, though perplexing, demonstrate ingenuity or desperation, Cashin countered, a tired smile playing on his lips. Perhaps both, Zarla conceded, her tone almost playful. Adira finished securing the regolith samples and stretched, the movement exaggerated by the constraints of her suit. Okay, Zarla, we've got our moon dust. Ready to see if human innovation is all it's cracked up to be. If it fails, at least it will be a memorable failure, Zarla replied, her voice a melodic mix of clicks and whistles. Optimism, Cashin said, echoing Adira's earlier sentiment. Not just a delusion, but a lifestyle choice. Adira chuckled and led the way back to the control room, leaving Zarla to ponder the intricacies of human optimism. Inside, they set to repurposing the regolith, Cashin's hands moving deftly over the controls, while Adira monitored the power levels. The terraformers groaned in protest, but slowly they began to stabilize. "Looks like we might pull this off," Adira said, her voice bright with cautious hope. "Don't jinx it," Cashin warned, his fingers crossed behind his back. "Jinxes are just another form of optimism," she countered, her grin evident even through the visor of her helmet. Time passed slowly, the rhythmic hum of the machines weaving its way into their consciousness, a lullaby of technology and desperation. Finally, they stepped back, surveying their handiwork with a mix of relief and disbelief. "Keep talking to the machines like that," Adira muttered, "and they might start believing they're sentient." Cashin shot her a wry look. "I'd rather not give them any ideas." Just then Zarla reappeared, her curiosity unabated. "Is this what you call making do?" Cashin shrugged. "More like making do with impending disaster, but close enough." The alien's antennae flicked, a gesture Cashin had come to recognize as either amusement or confusion. "Possibly both. Your resilience is commendable, thanks," Adira replied with a grin. "We specialize in last-minute saves." "Very human," Zarla observed, her tone vaguely complimentary. "Though I must admit your fascination with death is puzzling." Cashin glanced at Adira, smirking. "Told you it'd be a tough sell." "Hey, death's just another part of life," Adira explained, her voice light. "We just like to make sure we're prepared for it." Zarla considered this, her expression unreadable. "I see. You are a curious species." "Curious," Cashin mused, "or maybe just a little bit crazy." "Like I said," Adira added, "just another part of life." Their laughter echoed in the cramped confines of the control room, a testament to their stubbornness in the face of certain doom. It wasn't much, Cashin thought, but it was enough to keep them going for now. As the terraformers settled into a grudging compliance, Cashin allowed himself a moment to breathe, the air still carrying that familiar whiff of recycled desperation. It wasn't the best situation, but it was theirs. And in a place where resources were scarcer than good fortune, sometimes that was the best you could hope for. "Think the aliens will ever get used to our way of doing things?" Adira asked, her eyes gleaming with mischief. "Not a chance," Cashin replied, shaking his head. "But maybe that's a good thing. Keeps life interesting." "Interesting," Adira echoed. "I guess that's one word for it." They watched as Zarla departed, the alien's antennae swaying with each step, leaving Cashin and Adira to ponder the mysteries of life, death, and lunar colonization. "So what now?" Adira asked, her voice a comforting presence in the quiet. Cashin shrugged, his gaze drifting to the vastness beyond the colony walls. "We keep going. One day at a time." "Sounds like a plan," Adira agreed, her smile soft and genuine. And so they continued, two figures against the endless expanse of space, their footsteps carving a path through uncertainty. Despite the odds, they'd survived another day, and for now, that was enough. As long as there was breath in their lungs, they'd keep fighting, keep laughing in the face of adversity, and keep proving that humans were a stubborn, irreverent bunch. And maybe, just maybe, that was their greatest strength. The colony's control room was a symphony of panic and failing machinery. The flickering lights overhead gave everything a strobe-like quality, making it feel like a particularly dismal nightclub. Cashin stood amidst it all, looking like he just walked into a joke he wasn't in on. The terraformers, now taking inspiration from the unreliable gods of technology, were in full rebellion. "Cashin!" Adira shouted over the cacophony, her fingers dancing over the control panel like a pianist trying to salvage a symphony from a piano on fire. "The terraformers are overheating. If they blow, we'll be swapping stories with the stars." "Wouldn't that be a cosmic chat?" Cashin muttered, tapping buttons with all the confidence of a man defusing a bomb with an instruction manual written in ancient Sumerian. "All right, We need to shut down non-essential functions. Prioritize life support. I'd hate for us to become human jerky before lunchtime. With a grunt that could have been mistaken for a laugh if you squinted hard enough, Adira redirected power, attempting to coax the life support systems into accepting more juice than a bodybuilder on a bender. As lights dimmed throughout the colony, the tension rippled through the corridors like a bad smell, the kind that lingered and refused to own up to its source. The rec room, now a refuge for the disgruntled and the terrified, was alive with the chatter of colonists guessing their odds of seeing the next sunrise. Who'd have thought our holiday destination would turn into a site for last wills and testaments? Adira mused, joining Cashin as they scanned the control panel's alarming array of red lights. The panel looked like a Christmas tree that had seen better Decembers. "I'll bet the travel brochures left that bit out," Cashin replied, eyes darting over the readouts. "Welcome to Selenia. Come for the lunar vistas, stay because your return flight's been vaporized." Outside, Zarla hovered uncertainly, her alien mind struggling to process the rapid escalation from mild concern to existential crisis. The alien ambassador's eyes darted to Adira and Cashin, the sight of human panic making her own tentacled hair stand on end. "Is this?" Zarla hesitated, choosing her words carefully as if navigating a minefield made of social faux pas, a typical human response. Cashin barely glanced up from his frantic button mashing. "What?" The sense of impending doom. "Yeah, standard Tuesday." Zarla's antennae twitched, the alien equivalent of raising an eyebrow. "I meant the laughter. You seem to find amusement in your potential demise." "That's just what we do," Adira said, her voice tinged with that brand of gallows humor perfected by those who'd seen the void and sneezed into it. "Laugh in the face of death, or at it. Depends on the day. This attitude is unsettling," Zarla confessed, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and horror. Cashin shot her a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Don't worry, you get used to it. Or you don't. The trick is to do whatever you have to in order to forget that you're running out of options." Meanwhile, the colony's non-essential systems were shutting down one after another, like a string of Christmas lights short-circuiting. The place was rapidly becoming a tomb, albeit one with a nice view of Earth. "Cashin, oxygen is dropping to oh shit levels," Adira called, her voice tight with urgency. "Wonderful," Cashin replied dryly. "I always wanted to know what it felt like to breathe through a straw." Adira turned to Zarla, whose usual calm was cracking under the pressure of human insanity. "Our problem is keeping this place livable. Yours is deciding if you want to stick around to see how we pull it off. Leave." Zarla echoed, her voice a mix of disbelief and curiosity. "You believe we should abandon you? Well, not if you've got a better idea," Cashin interjected, his optimism as worn as an old shoe. "But if you want to see how humans deal with crisis, you might want to stay." Zarla shifted, antennae twitching as she processed the information. Cashin returned to his frantic tinkering, a mechanic with a car that refused to see reason. "You humans are certainly unique," Zarla said finally, the word unique carrying all the weight of a diplomat trying to compliment a disastrous dinner party. "That's one way to put it," Cashin said. "Another is stubborn as hell." As the terraformers groaned like a constipated whale, Adira gave Cashin a look that said fix it or we're toast. Cashin ran a hand through his hair, leaving it looking like he'd been dragged through a hedge backward. All right. We need to vent the excess heat, or this whole operation is going to turn into a lovely crater." "Space venting," Adira mused. "The universe's way of saying I give up." "Exactly," he replied, starting the manual override. "Time to see if we can pull another miracle out of the void." "You make it sound so easy," Zarla commented, her alien tone bordering on admiration. "Not easy, just necessary," Adira muttered as she watched Cashin work. With a final, decisive slam on the controls, Cashin initiated the venting process. The terraformer's word vibrated and then fell silent, the noise replaced by a low hum, a sound that for once was reassuring rather than ominous. Well, Cashin said, leaning back with the air of a man who just wrestled a bear and lived to tell the tale, that was either the best or worst idea I've ever had. Always nice when there's no middle ground, Adira replied, her smile wry and exhausted. Zarla watched them, her alien face an unreadable mask. Is this what you mean by resilience? Cashin shrugged, a tired grin creeping onto his face. Resilience, stupidity, take your pick. Humans are fascinating, Zarla mused, her eyes flickering with a hint of respect. Your capacity to adapt is unparalleled, not to mention our capacity to screw things up in the first place, Adira quipped. Guess it balances out. With the immediate crisis averted, the three of them stood in the control room, the silence more comforting than the chaos that had preceded it. Cashin's shoulders relaxed, the weight of the world, or at least this little corner of it, lessened for the moment. So, Cashin began, turning to Zarla. You sticking around to see what we mess up next? Zarla considered this, her alien mind weighing the curiosity against the potential danger. I believe I will. Your approach to existence is enlightening. Good choice, Adira said, stretching her arms over her head. We could use all the help we can get. As the control room settled into a calm that was both welcome and unnerving, Cashin and Adira shared a look that said, without words, that they'd done it once again. Survived, thrived, and maybe even impressed an alien ambassador in the process. Think we'll ever run out of ways to surprise them? Adira asked, her voice light despite the dark circles under her eyes. Not as long as we keep finding new ways to almost kill ourselves, Cashin replied dryly. They shared a laugh, a small victory in the grand scheme of things, but a victory nonetheless. In a place where tomorrow was never guaranteed, sometimes surviving today was the best you could do. As the terraformers settled into a steady rhythm, the colonists began to emerge from their nooks and crannies, the tension in the air shifting from panic to cautious relief. Cashin watched them, a silent guardian, his thoughts already turning to the next potential disaster. Guess we live to fight another day, Adira said, her voice a comforting anchor in the uncertainty. Yeah, Cashin agreed, his eyes drifting to the viewport where Earth hung serenely, oblivious to the chaos below. And while we're at it, we might even figure out how to make this rock feel like home. Zarla, observing them with growing interest, nodded. I look forward to witnessing this journey. Cashin gave her a nod, his grin still in place. Stick around, Zarla. I guarantee it'll be a wild ride. As they stood there, three figures against the backdrop of a colony that refused to give in, Cashin knew one thing for certain. They'd face whatever came next with the same stubborn tenacity that had gotten them this far. After all, if laughter really was the best medicine, they had more than a fighting chance. And so, with the terraformers humming their song of reluctant compliance, Cashin, Adira, and Zarla prepared to face the next challenge, their spirits buoyed by the knowledge that, in space, the only constant was chaos, and they were getting damn good at navigating it. The hum of the terraformers had barely settled before the control panel sputtered back to life like a drunk waking up from a particularly nasty bender. Cashin stared at it, the sickly red lights now blinking faster than before, as if taunting him. It was like the universe had decided he needed a new hobby, collecting cosmic disasters. Well, shit, Cashin muttered, the statement carrying all the weight of a man who'd just been handed a bag of lemons by life, except these lemons had developed a strange taste for arsenic. Adira glanced over, her face a mask of calm that was beginning to crack at the edges. What now? Did the panel decide it wanted to take up interpretive dance? No, just having a meltdown, Cashin replied, tapping furiously at buttons that seemed to respond with the enthusiasm of a teenager being asked to clean their room. Turns out my genius plan was more like declaring war on a beehive. Outside, Zarla, who'd been observing with what Cashin suspected was a growing sense of human-induced horror, hovered closer, her tentacles twitching nervously. Is this normal? Adira rubbed the bridge of her nose with a sigh that spoke volumes. Normal's been on holiday since we got here, Zarla. We're in the land of improvisation now. Cashin slapped the panel in frustration, earning a spark that singed his fingertips. Damn thing's more temperamental than my ex, he grumbled, shaking his hand as if he could fling the pain into the void. At this rate, we'll be the first lunar colony to implode from sheer incompetence. Lovely headline for the history books, Adira quipped, her fingers dancing over her own set of controls with the precision of a pianist playing at gunpoint. Let's just hope our obituaries are printed with a sense of humor. Zarla's antennae did that twitchy thing again, her version of a nervous tick. Perhaps it would be wise for me to withdraw, she said, her voice carrying the diplomatic tone of someone trying to tell a friend they've got spinach in their teeth. It seems humans have a penchant for self-destruction. Penchant is putting it mildly, Cashin replied, not looking up from the panel now resembling a battlefield more than a control interface. We practically majored in it. Adira shot him a look that was half exasperation, half admiration. Can't say we don't know how to keep things interesting, or suicidal, Zarla added, her eyes wide as she watched the chaos unfold. Your resilience is admirable, but your methods are batshit. Cashin finished for her, finally stepping back from the controls with a grimace. Yeah, we're aware. As if on cue, the terraformers outside issued a sound that could only be described as a death rattle. Cashin winced, the noise a stark reminder that his latest attempt at heroics had gone decidedly south. Selenia was now one bad decision away from being the universe's largest crater. All right, new plan, Adira said, her tone one of forced optimism. We need to cool these terraformers down before they decide to add explosion to their resume. Cashin nodded, the fatigue settling into his bones like an unwelcome guest. And how do you suggest we do that without turning this place into a sauna? Adira's eyes sparkled with that dangerous glint that sometimes preceded either genius or disaster. We could try rerouting power again, see if we can bypass the mainframe and manually control the heat. Great, Cashin replied, more button mashing. I was worried I'd run out of opportunities to ruin my day further. Zarla, whose gaze had never left the two humans, seemed to be wrestling with the urge to flee and the curiosity that kept her anchored. Do you require my assistance? Depends, Cashin said, casting her a lopsided grin. Are you any good at not blowing things up? Zarla hesitated, her alien mind clearly weighing the possibility of her involvement making things worse. I will do my best. Good enough, Adira snapped, tapping a sequence on her panel with the fervor of a gambler on a winning streak. I need you to keep an eye on these readings. Let us know if we're about to go from warming milk to nuclear meltdown. Cashin joined her, the two of them now working in unison, a well-oiled machine despite the chaos surrounding them. It was a testament to their partnership, or maybe just their shared insanity, that they could function so well under pressure. Looks like we're stabilizing, Cashin announced, his voice laced with cautious hope. Heat levels are dropping. Adira let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Now if only we could get oxygen levels back up to not dead. Minor detail, Cashin replied with a shrug. We'll get there. Zarla, who'd been following their every move with the intensity of a student cramming for finals, seemed to relax, her antennae settling into something resembling calm. Your ability to adapt continues to impress. Adapt or die, Adira quipped, flashing a grin that was more teeth than warmth. We're stubborn bastards like that. Cashin couldn't help but chuckle, the sound dry and brittle. If nothing else were entertaining, the terraformers, now humming with less malevolence, seemed to agree. Or maybe Cashin was just delirious. Either way, the immediate crisis had been averted for now. But as he stepped back to survey the control room, Cashin knew their troubles were far from over. What's next? Zarla asked, her voice tinged with genuine curiosity. Cashin exchanged a look with Adira, the two of them communicating without words. Next, we try not to cock things up any further, he said finally. And hope that the universe takes pity on us, Adira added, leaning against the console with a sigh that spoke of exhaustion and determination. As the chaos subsided into a fragile calm, Zarla hovered closer, her alien form a striking contrast to the human duo. "I must admit," she said, her voice thoughtful, "I was prepared to leave, but now you're hooked on the drama." Cashin suggested, half joking, half serious. Perhaps, Zarla replied, her eyes flickering with something akin to amusement. "There is much to learn from observing your species." Adira chuckled softly, the sound warm and reassuring. "We aim to please." Cashin, feeling the weight of the day settling into his shoulders, nodded. "And occasionally survive." With a final nod from Zarla, the three of them turned back to the control panel, the room settling into a tense, hopeful silence. Selenia might be a disaster zone, but it was their disaster zone, and for better or worse, they'd continue to fight for it. Whatever the universe had planned next, Cashin knew they'd face it together. After all, humanity's greatest strength was its ability to screw up and still find a way to laugh about it. As the terraformers hummed their reluctant compliance, Cashin, Adira, and Zarla prepared for whatever madness awaited. In the unforgiving void of space, laughter remained their best weapon against the darkness, and they were damn good at wielding it. And so they braced for the next challenge, their spirits buoyed by the knowledge that chaos was inevitable, but so was their defiance. Cashin Vern stood by the control panel, a now familiar battlefield of blinking red lights and static-ridden screens. He flicked a toggle switch, which responded with the enthusiasm of a cat on a rainy day. The terraformers outside hummed their discontent like a chorus of angry bees. He could almost imagine them plotting a coup. "Why is it," he mused aloud, "that every button I press seems to do the exact opposite of what it's supposed to? Maybe they are just as confused as you are." Adira Niven replied, not looking up from her own console. Her fingers danced across the keys with a practiced ease, her calm exterior showing only the slightest hint of wear. Cashin let out a dry laugh. "I'm sure they've formed a union by now. Demanding better working conditions, less overtime." Adira smirked. "They'd probably settle for a competent operator, Burn," Cashin said with faux sincerity, raising an invisible glass to her. "Though I'll have you know, Adira, incompetence is my strongest suit." Adira gave a small snort. "You and the rest of humanity, Cashin." From her corner, Zarla observed them with wide eyes, her tentacles floating with a sort of nervous energy that was oddly endearing. "Is this how you cope with stress?" she asked, genuinely perplexed. "Pretty much," Cashin said, giving her a thumbs up. "Nothing like a bit of gallows humor to keep the madness at bay." "I see," Zarla replied, though it was clear she was still baffled by the human compulsion to joke in the face of disaster. "You're quite resilient." Adira leaned back in her chair, a contemplative look on her face. "Resilience is about all we've got left, isn't it?" She stared at the flickering lights overhead, as if searching for answers in their erratic dance. Cashin felt a shift in the air, more than just a shift in his own mood. Maybe it was the oxygen levels fluctuating again, but something told him Adira was about to get philosophical. And sure enough, she did. "We've been running around putting out fires," she said, her voice taking on a thoughtful quality, "but maybe it's time to stop and think about why we're here. What's worth saving? You're not going to start quoting some moon-born version of an ancient Earth philosopher, are you?" Cashin teased, though his tone was more curious than mocking. Adira shrugged, a small smile playing on her lips. "If it gets us through the day without turning into lunar barbecue, then maybe." Zarla watched them intently, her curiosity piqued. "Humans have always intrigued me with their beliefs and customs surrounding death," she said, her voice soft yet probing. "Why do you hold such ceremonies for machines?" Cashin glanced at Adira, who gave him a nod. "You want to take this one?" she asked. He sighed, straightening up. "Machines like our terraformers here, they're more than just hunks of metal. They're part of our survival kit. Losing one's like losing a comrade." Adira took over, her expression softening. "And when they fail, it's a reminder of our own fragility. The memorial services, they're a way of coping, giving meaning to the madness." Cashin added, "Plus, It's an excuse to get together and pretend we're not stuck on a god-forsaken rock orbiting a bigger rock. Zarla seemed to mull over their words, her tentacles moving in a pattern that might have been considered thoughtful by her species. Fascinating, she murmured. Perhaps this is something I should experience firsthand. Cashin raised an eyebrow. You want to join us for the next machine funeral? Could be quite the spectacle. We might even break out the last of the decent booze. Adira shot him a look. You know that's reserved for when we actually fix something, right? Details. Cashin waved a hand dismissively, though he couldn't help but smile. Let's face it, if we can't laugh about it, we're screwed. As the moment passed, Adira returned to her console and Cashin followed suit. They'd had their dose of cosmic introspection, a dangerous thing when you're teetering on the edge of sanity. So, Adira said, breaking the silence, "Any bright ideas on how to stop our metal friends from throwing a tantrum?" "Funny you should ask," Cashin replied, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "I was thinking about recalibrating the thermal regulators manually. It might just give us a bit of leeway, manual recalibration." Adira repeated, brow furrowed. "You're aware that could either save us or kill us, right?" 50-50, Cashin said, grinning. "Those are the best odds we've had all week, gambling with our lives," Adira said with a resigned sigh. What could possibly go wrong? Zarla, ever the keen observer, hovered a bit closer, her curiosity evidently piqued once more. "Is this another human tradition, sort of?" Cashin replied, giving her a conspiratorial wink. "We like to call it winging it." With a touch more confidence than he felt, Cashin began inputting commands into the control panel, the flickering lights reflecting off his face like a neon sign advertising a bad idea. Adira watched him, hands at the ready to spring into action should things go more sideways than they already were. "So what exactly are we doing?" Zarla asked, her eyes darting between the two humans and their mysterious machinery. "Think of it like adding a dash of spice to a dish," Adira explained, though her analogy was as much for Cashin's benefit as Zarla's. "Too little and nothing changes. Too much and the whole thing might just explode." "A comforting thought," Zarla replied, her tone dry as the lunar dust outside. Cashin continued working, the console beginning to resemble a demented Christmas tree with its sporadic blinking. "All right, let's see if we can't get these terraformers to behave themselves." With one final, decisive press of a button, Cashin leaned back, holding his breath as he watched the panel. For a painfully long moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sputter and a surge, the terraformer's hum shifted to a more harmonious note. "Ha!" Cashin exclaimed, punching the air triumphantly. "Didn't blow us up this time." Adira let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. "I dare say we might just survive another day." Zarla, while not entirely understanding the intricacies of human machinery, seemed to catch on to the relief that came with a small victory. "Your tenacity is quite remarkable," she said. "Thanks," Cashin replied, still riding the high of not having fried them all. "It's either that or giving up, and honestly, giving up sounds way too boring." Adira chuckled. "Besides, we've still got to solve the oxygen problem, and I'm not quite ready to suffocate." Cashin glanced at her, the humor in his eyes replaced by something more genuine. "You know, for all the crap we've been through, I wouldn't want to be stuck on this rock with anyone else." Adira smiled, the expression softened by a hint of warmth. "Same here. And you, Zarla, you're welcome to stick around for the show." Zarla inclined her head, her own version of a smile. "I believe I shall. There is much to learn from your experiences." As the lights of the control room flickered once more, Cashin looked around at the place he reluctantly called home. It was still a mess, still teetering on the brink of disaster, but it was theirs. And for now, that was enough. "All right," he said, clapping his hands together. "Let's see if we can convince these machines to keep the air breathable. What's your next genius plan, O fearless leader?" Adira asked, raising an eyebrow. Cashin shrugged, a crooked smile playing on his lips. "I was thinking of praying to the tech gods. You know, just in case they take pity on us this once." Adira rolled her eyes, but there was a fondness to it. Lead the way, Cashin. Let's see if we can't pull another miracle out of this lunar hat. As they set to work once more, Zarla watched them with a mixture of curiosity and admiration. For all their flaws and foibles, humans had a way of enduring, of finding humor in the darkest of places. And as Cashin, Adira, and Zarla continued their makeshift dance with destiny, the terraformers hummed their reluctant compliance, an unspoken agreement to survive, if only for one more day. In the grand cosmic lottery, they might not have drawn the best numbers, but damn it, they'd make sure their story was never boring. And so, with laughter as their shield and stubbornness as their sword, they faced the unknown with a shared smirk and a wink at the universe. Because in space, no one can hear you laugh, except maybe the person standing next to you, equally insane, equally determined. Cashin looked at the control panel, a mess of blinking lights and buttons that never seemed to do quite what they were supposed to. Well, here we are again, just three geniuses trying to prevent our untimely demise in space. What's the plan? Fearless leader Adira rolled her eyes, but not without a smirk. I say we try to realign the oxygen scrubbers manually. And by we, I mean you, because I'm not in the mood to become lunar toast today. Fair enough, Cashin replied, cracking his knuckles. You know, when I was a kid, I thought space would be glamorous. Turns out, it's a lot like working in a factory, but with a higher chance of explosive decompression. Zarla, ever the observational sponge, tilted her bulbous head. Why do you persist with such a dangerous existence? Surely there are simpler ways to live. True, Cashin conceded, squinting at a particularly stubborn switch. But where's the fun in that? Besides, I hear beach property is overrated and full of sand. Adira shook her head, checking the status of the terraformers on her own console. You know, when we said we'd move to the moon, I didn't think it meant eternal overtime with death as a potential side effect. Could be worse, Cashin said, giving the switch a satisfying flick. We could be stuck dealing with customer service calls instead. I'd rather face an army of malfunctioning terraformers, Adira replied with a shudder. Meanwhile, Zarla's tentacles twitched with curiosity. This humor, it's a form of coping, yes, got it in one, Cashin replied, offering her a mock salute. Keeps us from crying when the air runs out. Don't give her ideas, Adira warned, a flicker of amusement in her eyes. I don't think Zarla's ready for the full human experience just yet. Ah, but I am here to learn, Zarla said, her tone laced with sincerity. If humor helps with survival, I must understand it more. All right then, Cashin said, rolling up his sleeves. Lesson 1. Never take life too seriously. You'll never get out alive, Adira snorted, reaching over to nudge Cashin aside. Let's see those manual skills of yours in action then. We've got a colony to save. Of course, Cashin said, adopting an exaggerated aristocratic tone. I'll have this sorted in 2 shakes of a tentacle. As he worked, Adira explained the intricacies of human resilience to Zarla, her voice steady despite the precariousness of their situation. Humans have a knack for finding meaning in chaos, even if it's just to get through the day, like the ceremonies for machines. Zarla asked, recalling their earlier discussion. Exactly, Adira replied, nodding. When you're living on borrowed time, you cling to whatever helps. Laughter, rituals, the occasional existential crisis. Cashin, elbow-deep in wiring, chimed in. Or in our case, the belief that we're too stubborn to die. Zarla seemed to consider this, her tentacles weaving a thoughtful pattern. Your species is quite remarkable. Where others might surrender, you persist. Either that, or we're just incredibly bad at quitting, Cashin said, finally managing to realign a particularly troublesome cable. There should hold for now. Adira peered at the monitor, her fingers dancing across the keys. Readings are stabilizing. Looks like we might just keep breathing after all. Cashin let out a breath, a mixture of relief and disbelief. I'll drink to that. If only we had anything decent to drink. Next crisis, we're requisitioning a better stockpile, Adira promised, her eyes still glued to the screens. Deal, Cashin agreed before turning to Zarla. So, what do you think? Ready to join the human lunacy, Zarla's eyes glimmered with something akin to amusement. I believe I will observe a while longer before fully partaking. Wise choice, Cashin said, grinning. It's not for everyone, but if you change your mind, we've got plenty of madness to share. Adira leaned back, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. Well, Zarla, what's the verdict? Humans as fascinating as you hoped. Indeed, Zarla replied, her tentacles giving a satisfied ripple. You possess a resilience that is both perplexing and admirable. I am eager to learn more. Cashin clapped his hands together. Well, we're here all week. Try the food, don't breathe too deeply, and remember, everything in space wants to kill you. Adira laughed, a genuine sound that echoed off the walls of the cramped control room. Morbid as that is, it's not far from the truth. Speaking of which, Cashin said, gesturing to the now stable console, let's make sure our miracle holds up, shall we? Adira nodded, her focus shifting back to the task at hand. Right. We've still got a long way to go before we can call it a day. Cashin sighed, but there was a spark of determination in his eyes. Hey, if we can keep the air breathable and the colony intact, I'll call that a win. Zarla observed their interaction, her admiration for these humans growing with each moment. You are truly a resilient species. Stubborn, Cashin corrected, though there was a hint of pride in his voice. We prefer stubborn. As the three of them continued their work, the flickering lights of the control room seemed a little less oppressive, the hum of the terraformers a little more cooperative. They were far from out of the woods, but for now, they'd carved out a small victory against the relentless void. Cashin turned to Adira, a wry smile tugging at his lips. You know, maybe we should start writing a book. How Not to Die in Space, A Human's Guide to Stupidity and Survival. Adira chuckled, nodding in agreement. I'd read it. Hell, I'd write it with you. Put me down for a copy, Zarla added, surprising them both with her own attempt at humor. Looks like we've got our first customer, Cashin said, grinning. Stick around, Zarla. There's plenty more where that came from. With the terraformers finally cooperating and their spirits lifted, the trio settled into a rhythm, the task of keeping the colony alive a little less daunting with each passing moment. They'd face whatever came next together, armed with nothing but their wits, a healthy dose of gallows humor, and the unwavering belief that they were too stubborn to fail. As they worked, the control room's chaos slowly ebbed into a semblance of order, the blinking lights a bit more like stars and a bit less like a death sentence. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, and for a bunch of lunatics on a rock in space, it was enough. Adira stretched, her shoulders finally relaxing. Well, Cashin, looks like we might just make it through another day. Wouldn't have it any other way, Cashin replied, glancing at Zarla. And don't worry, once you've been here long enough, you'll learn to love the insanity. Zarla's tentacles fluttered, her curiosity evident. I look forward to it. There is much to learn from your resilience. Cashin chuckled, a low, warm sound that filled the room. Yeah, there is. And if nothing else, we'll make sure you never get bored. With the terraformers humming contentedly, the oxygen stabilizing, and their spirits buoyed by both humor and determination, they faced the future with a shared spark of irreverent optimism. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they'd tackle them head-on, with a laugh and a sneer in the face of the cosmos. And as the lights flickered ever so faintly, the trio continued their vigil, a testament to the tenacity of the human spirit and the enduring power of laughter in the darkest of times. In the grand scheme of things, they were small, but together they were unstoppable. Well, Cashin said, leaning back with a satisfied sigh, looks like we've cheated death once again. Adira nodded, a grin tugging at her lips. For now. But what's life without a little risk? Zarla observed them both, her admiration for these strange, resilient creatures only growing. Indeed. In your company, even the void seems less daunting. Cashin clapped a hand on Zarla's shoulder, careful not to jostle her tentacles. Welcome to the team, Zarla. Together, we'll make sure the universe never forgets just how stubborn humanity can be. And with that, they returned to their work, a newfound camaraderie binding them together against the unforgiving backdrop of space. After all, in a universe that seemed determined to snuff them out, they'd found not just survival but a reason to laugh. And that, they realized, was the greatest victory of all. In the end, as they once again faced the endless expanse of the lunar landscape, they knew they were more than just survivors. They were the mad ones, the jesters in the court of the cosmos, and damn it, they were going to enjoy every moment of it. Cashin glanced out the window of the cramped rec room. Same desolate view, same bleak horizon. If he squinted, he could almost convince himself the dust was an ocean, the kind where people frolic rather than drown in existential despair. At least their oxygen crisis was averted, for now, thanks to some good old-fashioned hard work and dangerously low expectations. "Looks like no one's suffocating today," he said, raising an imaginary glass. To mediocrity, Adira snorted, her fingers tapping rhythmically on a console. "To surviving another day without becoming a statistic," she replied. "And to the fact that we've gotten so good at dodging death, we should get a medal. Or at least a laugh track. Shiny awards might be asking a bit much," Cashin said with a shrug, "but maybe a nice, shiny tin of air freshener might spruce up this place." "I mean, if we're dreaming big," Zarla's tentacles twitched in amusement. "Humans have a unique way of celebrating victories, even minor ones. It's the small achievements that keep us from spiraling into madness," Adira said, leaning back with a mock sigh of contentment. "That, and the occasional existential crisis. Keeps things interesting," Cashin nodded, his eyes wandering over the room's dingy walls. "Yeah, one more day breathing, one less day of becoming dehydrated jerky for some cosmic critter. I'd say that's worth a toast, or a decent drink," Adira added. "Which, knowing our luck, will remain a pipe dream." Speaking of dreams, Cashin continued, turning to Zarla. "What do our new alien friends think of our little slice of chaos?" Zarla's eyes glimmered, her interest piqued. "Your resilience is intriguing. And your humor, while peculiar, speaks volumes about your species' adaptability." "Adaptability, huh?" Cashin said, smirking. "More like we're too stubborn to know when we're beat." Adira shook her head slightly, a fond smile on her lips. "Call it what you like, but it's gotten us this far, hasn't it?" The door slid open, revealing a few other colonists shuffling into the rec room, each carrying the weight of life in space on their shoulders. There was a comforting camaraderie in their shared burden, one that bound them tighter than a vacuum-sealed pack of dehydrated rations. "Look at that," Cashin said, nodding toward the newcomers. "Morose and unwashed, that's our lot. But damn if we don't make it look good," Adira chuckled. "We've got charm by the bucket load, just not water." Zarla observed the group, her tentacles weaving a thoughtful pattern. "Your ability to find kinship amidst hardship is truly impressive. It's more like misery loves company," Cashin quipped. "And we're all pretty miserable." The colonists muddled around, finding seats amidst the clutter. Their conversation was a low hum, punctuated by the occasional dark joke or cynical observation that only those truly steeped in the lunar life could appreciate. "So, Zarla," Adira said, diverting the alien's attention, "learn anything new from us humans?" Zarla pondered, her gaze drifting across the room. "I've learned that your species finds strength in humor and unity, even when faced with overwhelming odds." Cashin gave a mock bow. "Glad to know our suffering entertains the galaxy. We aim to please." A ripple of laughter moved through the room, a sound as rare and precious as any mineral they might dig from the moon's surface. It was moments like these, Cashin realized, where the weight of their struggle felt just a little bit lighter. "All right, enough with the sentiment," Adira said, brushing off the moment. "We've got a colony to keep running. What's next on our never-ending to-do list?" Cashin consulted his wrist comm, the device blinking irritably at him. "Well, seeing as we're not dead yet, maybe we should check on the oxygen scrubbers. Could use a bit of TLC." "Great," Adira replied, rolling her eyes. "More quality time with things that can kill us." "My favorite." Zarla watched them with her usual mix of curiosity and admiration. "I will accompany you. Perhaps I can learn more from observing your actions." Cashin gestured grandly toward the door. "Let's go, then." to the magnificent world of ductwork and desperation. The trio made their way through the corridors of the colony, each step echoing ominously in the narrow passageways. It wasn't glamorous, but it was home, albeit the kind of home that came with a side order of possible asphyxiation. Remember when we thought moving to the moon would be exciting? Cassian mused as they walked. Adventure, discovery, all that, yeah, Adira muttered, and we ended up with malfunctioning machines and a constant lack of everything. Guess that's the price of adventure, Cassian said with a shrug. You sign up for the view, not the amenities. They reached the oxygen scrubbers, the machines looming like ancient sentinels in the dim light. Each one hissed and clanked with the kind of petulant defiance Cassian could appreciate. "All right, you temperamental buckets of bolts," he said, addressing the machines as if they were misbehaving children, "be nice, and we'll be nice back." Adira was already elbow-deep in one of the units, her fingers deftly adjusting a series of stubbornly misaligned components. If only these things responded to sweet words, Cassian laughed, or a good kick. Could solve a lot of problems that way. Zarla observed their work, her tentacles flicking with interest. Your ability to maintain such complex systems with limited resources is commendable, more like patching holes in a sinking ship, Cassian said, pulling out a tangled mess of wires and frowning at it. But we make do. Adira looked up, her eyes meeting Zarla's. It's just what we do. When everything's falling apart, you've got two options: fix it or drown. Zarla nodded, taking in their words with an air of understanding. The human spirit is indeed remarkable. You adapt to survive. Cassian grinned, a hint of mischief in his eyes. Or we're just too stubborn to know when to quit. Adira finished her adjustments, stepping back with a satisfied nod. There should keep us breathing for another day. Another day, another crisis averted, Cassian said, wiping his hands on his jumpsuit. Guess we're on a roll. They made their way back to the control room, the familiar hum of the colony's life support systems a comforting backdrop to their thoughts. It was a precarious existence, balancing on the edge of disaster, but it was theirs. As they settled in, Cassian couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. They'd fought against all odds, and while the future remained uncertain, they had each other, and that made all the difference. "So, what's next?" Adira asked, her tone light despite the gravity of their situation. Cassian shrugged. "We keep doing what we do best: survive, adapt, and maybe crack a few jokes along the way." Adira laughed softly, the sound a balm against the harshness of their reality. "Sounds like a plan." Zarla watched them, her admiration evident. "Your resilience is inspirational. Perhaps this partnership between our species will lead to great things." Cassian raised an eyebrow, a grin playing on his lips. "Don't get too optimistic. We're humans after all. We tend to make messes wherever we go." Adira nudged him playfully. "But we clean them up too." "True," Cassian conceded. "Maybe there's hope for us yet." As they sat together, the weight of their shared struggle became just a little bit lighter. They'd faced the void and lived to tell the tale, armed with nothing but their wits and a healthy dose of gallows humor. And as the lights of the control room flickered ever so faintly, they knew they were more than just survivors. They were a team, a testament to the power of camaraderie in the face of impossible odds. "Well," Cassian said with a sigh, "looks like we've got a little more time before the next crisis hits." Adira nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Let's make the most of it." Zarla, her curiosity unabated, leaned closer. "I look forward to learning more about your species. There is much we can achieve together." With that, they settled into a comfortable silence, the control room a sanctuary against the vastness of space. They might not have all the answers, but they had each other, and that was more than enough. In the end, as they faced the endless expanse of the lunar landscape, they knew they were more than just survivors. They were the mad ones, the jesters in the court of the cosmos, and damn it, they were going to enjoy every moment of it. And through it all, they found strength in one another, united in their shared defiance against the universe, a bond that even the cold vastness of space could not break. Cassian leaned back, a contented sigh escaping his lips. Here's to surviving another day, to making the impossible possible, Adira added. Indeed, Zarla agreed, her tentacles curling in what Cashin hoped was a smile. Together, we shall explore the mysteries of the universe. With that, they returned to their work, a newfound camaraderie binding them together against the unforgiving backdrop of space. They'd face whatever came next with a laugh and a sneer, defying the void with every breath. For in the end, they were more than just a crew. They were a family, bound by their shared struggle and the enduring power of laughter in the darkest of times.